¿Qué pasa? Amor, oh, qué lindo. ¿Qué te regaló eso? Son bacanes. ¿Qué te lo regaló?
No sé, pero hay.
Hey, Adrian.
Hi, Joaquin. How are you?
All good, and you?
Good, thank you.
Good to see you. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone that is connected to our webinar on how to make LinkedIn work for your business. Today, we will cover different things. We will talk about the importance of LinkedIn for B2B marketeers, how to plan a campaign correctly, insights on compelling content, and more. And we are with Adrian Hobbs. He's our customer success manager lead for Adsact. And hi, Adrian, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
Brilliant. Give me 1 second So let's start the conversation. Let's talk about why LinkedIn for B2B marketing. A very open question. Let's start from that.
Yeah. So LinkedIn at the moment kind of holds a unique position in the market because it's one of the only platforms where you have some ability to target both companies, the people working for those companies, and therefore the very fact that it is a work-related platform for them, for probably 99% of the people who use it, if not more. So LinkedIn, it is one of the very few platforms that B2B marketers can look at and go, okay, that is specifically a business environment. I know the companies that people are working for, and I can target people to some degree, right? And so that's why it's so important, and why obviously so many people are using it, and why it's becoming expensive. And one of the challenges that we have as B2B marketeers, right? Because most platforms that have audiences out there, if we're being honest, are B2C platforms that people try to use for business marketing, and if it's related, and then the Meta and X and other platforms can help. But if for most B2B businesses and the message they want to put out there, LinkedIn offers that unique proposition of knowing you are talking to people linked to a business of some description.
Of course. And when we start setting up the objectives for our campaigns, what are those the right objectives to set up a LinkedIn campaign?
Yeah, so this comes back to your first point, is why use LinkedIn, right? So it's one of the conversations we often have with people is like, I want to generate leads, that's the number one thing we need to do. And yes, as part of the process, lead gen is an important factor. But actually, when you think about LinkedIn, and particularly if you're new to it, actually there's work to be done to establish yourself as a brand or a product in front of your potential customer base. So therefore the kind of principles around advertising, whether that's digitally or otherwise, still exist. So you need to establish a presence, you need to establish a connection with your potential buyers, your prospects. And so we look at LinkedIn, as LinkedIn do, and there's lots of content on this, so I won't kind of dive into the detail of it, but there's 3 stages that we look at, one of which is driving awareness. So you might consider that brand. Second is consideration. And then the third step is lead gen. And we think it's really important to work across those, because if you don't establish a connection with your potential customers, you haven't got enough. They're not familiar enough with you, and they're not comfortable enough with you. The trust isn't there, the familiarity isn't there, in order for them to take an action that is bottom of funnel lead gen orientated. So,
and it's very tempting as well, because the audience is there, you can see their names, you see they are a good fit for your business. So of course it's super tempting to go directly to lead gen.
Of course it is, and particularly because LinkedIn is expensive, right? So you want as quickly as possible, you kind of link spend to lead gen, and therefore, most people we talk to are like, well, that's what we've got to do. But the problem is, in doing that, you waste your money, because if you ask for that connection, that lead gen opportunity too early, you'll get very low returns. So you've got to go through the process of getting in front of your audience enough times to warm them up, to build familiarity, so they're ready to engage with you. And it's talked about somewhere between 8 and 11 times, depending on your product service, frequency wise, that somebody needs to engage with your messaging before they're at a point where they're ready to buy from you. So there's a lot of work to be done up front within LinkedIn, driving awareness, and awareness is one of the more cost-effective things you can do on LinkedIn as well. So that's why it should always be part of your campaign, because you're actually making sure that your brand and your product is being repeatedly introduced to your client base, and we'll talk about how you do that a bit further on. How do you then engage? So that's the second step. So that's the consideration piece. How do I deliver something of value that entices people to connect with my product, service, brand? And that is often an exchange of value. So we're offering something that's useful to people who are looking at our category. And then the final step is then, having earned that trust, having given them something of value and they've engaged with us, I then can go back to that audience and ask if they want to take that kind of call to action, which is maybe, demo, quote, whatever it is, but that bottom of funnel activity on lead gen, which you have to earn the right to get to, in our opinion. Again, it depends on the product or service and your brand, but typically we would only, for example, target lead gen to people who've already engaged with us. So if we're looking at our customers, we say, okay, once they've connected with you, once they've engaged with you, then we can retarget.
Yeah, we will talk in a second about retargeting and how powerful it is on LinkedIn. But before we get into that, we already talked about the power of LinkedIn, of having your audience in front of you. But could you walk us through the process of creating an ICP, an ideal customer profile, before launching a LinkedIn campaign? How important is that?
Yeah, so as you know, I could talk about this a lot, right? It's really important to us, and important, I think, it's hugely valuable. The thing about LinkedIn is you've got this huge audience. I mean, it's huge, right? Huge global audience of business professionals, and you can see the seniority, you can see their job title, you can see the company they work for, you can see lots of information about them, right? So targeting people, you can do pretty well. The challenge you've got, though, is how do you get to the right companies, right? So on LinkedIn, you've got very few levers. They're important ones, like size and industry sector and so on. So there are some important levers you can pull to refine your audience, but actually it's still going to give you a very untargeted way of finding prospects. So it's really important to try and think through as much as you can, what does my audience look like? Look at the available levers on LinkedIn and use those as a starting point. So that's your starting point. So you've at least shrunk the kind of global audience down to location specific, sector specific, if that's possible, size of company and so on.
Size, revenue.
Yeah, and then you can link it to the people, and that's where LinkedIn works best, right? So those two things. But that our strong belief, and we've seen this time and time again, if you can, before you do that, identify an audience which you can upload to LinkedIn. So when we talk about audience, if you can identify a set of companies that you can upload to LinkedIn, it's a game changer. And if I give you an analogy, so let's say you walked into a conference center. So let's say it's for to talk to FDs, and there's thousands of FDs there. And you go up to a room and somebody says, oh, it's £100 to go into this room. And inside are 100 FDs of the size of company that you want to work with. So there's 100 people in there and you can go in. But you don't know if any of those are good fit companies. So you've got 100 people. So you've got to go in and you've got to talk to a lot of people very quickly to try and find those people that are useful to you. So the alternative is a room next door with 10 FDs in, all who filled out a questionnaire, and so have some degree of relevance to your product or service, but it costs you £200 to get into that room, right? So which would you take? Most
more
people
targeted one, yeah,
because it's 5 times more efficient for twice the cost. And I think the audience management up front is exactly the same. It's exactly the same thing. So, if you advertise without an audience, you're advertising to a huge number of people, and you're spending, instead of time, you're spending budget on a huge number of people at companies that you don't know are going to work, a good fit for you. Whereas if you can do some upfront targeting, then you can significantly shrink that audience, and therefore your budget is going towards companies and therefore people at companies that you know have a better chance of engaging with you. So we would always recommend trying to upload an audience that works for you. And obviously you can use your existing CRM data to do that. You can look at acquiring data and sorting out, or you can work with a company like us that builds a bespoke ICP for you, and therefore gives you a total addressable market, which will be much more targeted than anything you can do on LinkedIn or kind of through.
Yeah, and then using LinkedIn filters at a contact level is really effective as well, because they have all the information about our job titles, how many times you've been in your company, if you have changed jobs, etc. That is really hard to find somewhere else, right? But if you target the right business, and then on top of that you use LinkedIn filters,
exactly,
you're very well positioned.
And that's where LinkedIn is at its best, right? So if you can upload the right companies and actually exclude some companies as well, so they include and exclude, so using both sides of that process, and then you're absolutely right. Then the real value then is you've got good ways of identifying the right people to speak to.
Yeah, well, I invite everyone next week, and actually tomorrow we will run another webinar on the power of exclusion. As you mentioned, there are some companies on LinkedIn that are very hard to sell to because they're too big. They have too many people on LinkedIn. They are just clicking on your ads, but they will never buy. And we will talk about the characteristics of these companies. We call the sucking vampires.
Yeah,
because they suck your budget. All right, so let's continue. Let's talk about content. What types of content have you found most effective on LinkedIn for driving engagement and conversions?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things to work through here. I think one of which is content is just up front is super important. So as you prepare to spend budget on LinkedIn, you need to consider the fact that you need to generate good content in order to make the process work. And we've seen this time and time again where companies have poor or stale content, and then you get good content, or you refresh that stale content, and suddenly performance significantly improves. So before you go into it, just being aware that there's a commitment needed to generate content. Now, that content can vary in complexity a lot, right? So single image ads, maybe with a little bit of kind of GIF movement on, that's all good, right? That's got to be a starting point. And you need to consider the fact that within a single campaign, you need probably 5 bits of content, different bits of content that might have the same result, but it's really important, and I think we're coming to talk about this later, but really important to make sure that an individual has the opportunity to engage with you enough times. And if you just...
So you mean directing you, for example, to the same document, but with different images? Exactly.
So it might be a document, it may be a landing page on your website. So if it's awareness, and what I want to do is help people understand my brand or my product, then I'm going to put an interesting bit of imagery up, a simple message, and when they engage with that content, they'll end up on the right landing page, the right part of my website, or potentially some information loaded on LinkedIn. So they're still on the platform, and so that's the simplest way. And obviously from there you can, there are lots of variations, and sort of carousel ads. We like those because you get to get multiple messages in front of people. So again, if trying to introduce your company and your brand, that you can get 2 or 3 messages in front of somebody potentially. Use of video, really helpful, but again, it depends on what the outcome that you're looking for from that content, whether it's awareness, whether it's consideration. With consideration, we would always be looking to have some sort of value exchange there. So, please engage with me, and if you do engage with me and you give me some information, in return, I'll deliver something of value to you. So that value proposition is really important, and it's not about here's my great product or service. It should be something that is genuinely valuable in the category I'm looking at. So, if I'm looking at maybe a commercial mortgage, so one of our clients is, why is it valuable for me as a small and medium business owner to think about buying a property? What is in it for me? Not so much what is it that my product offers, but what is it? Why should I consider that?
And that comes again with what we discussed before about the audience and your ideal customer profile, right? How can you put the right content in front of the right people using LinkedIn filters? It probably is really hard. Like if you want to talk about commercial mortgages, well, which is the LinkedIn filter that you can use to select a good set of businesses that are a good fit for you?
So
probably not. Yeah.
And that's why actually linking content and audience is really helpful, because the better you're targeting, the better your messaging could be, right? Mm-hmm. So the two things really help each other. And we often, looking at different segments of audiences. So even when we generate audiences for our customers, we're then looking at how do we segment those so they can get their messaging really tight. And because those campaigns typically, cost less or more focus, and get better engagement. But that comes back to, you've got to be prepared to commit to your content, because then you've got multiple bits of content per segment that you need.
Exactly.
Content's super important. I think it's often undervalued, and not so much in terms of people understand the value, but the investment that you need to put in is perhaps more significant than people realize. So being committed to it, making sure you've got a process that you're happy with, that you can get content from, and I think we're seeing a trend probably linked to kind of the TikTok generation, where video content, for example, which used to be super polished and had to go away to be produced, actually we're seeing content on LinkedIn work that is much more informal, much more personal, if you like, more authentic. So I think thinking about clever ways to create content, not necessarily overproducing, but making sure in a very short period of time you get your message across in an authentic way. Video is a great way to do that. Again, you need to think about it, but these are all things that you can experiment with and work with. And
it's something that comes a lot in our podcast, The Future of B2B Digital Marketing, where people say that actually the best campaigns come from just recording a selfie video, or you don't need to spend like thousands of pounds on a campaign with an agency. Of course, that if you can do it, I'm sure you can get good results, but it's not always the case. Sometimes just homemade video can have very good performance if you are talking to the right audience with the right content in a natural way. That's,
I think. Yeah, and the great thing with LinkedIn, and if you're managing campaigns, you can test content pretty quickly, right? So you can see what's working and what's working, what isn't working, and therefore adjust it. We, as on those podcasts, we've also talked about how do we learn from consumer marketing in the B2B space. And at the end of the day, when you're on a platform which is targeting people, there's still an emotional connection there, or something that's going to spark my interest, and so therefore having a bit of fun with content, being prepared to be different with the content, we would definitely recommend. But also it depends on the products and the service and your brand, and
of course, and your budget. Not all the companies can afford to have different contents for, I don't know, different job titles. That would be great, right? Creating like one piece of content for the procurement team and one piece of content to the marketing team of your target prospects. But
you've got to, and I think being realistic about your budget, it's better that you can sustain something within your budget, and kind of ability to execute, than put it all up front and then 2 months later not be able to do anything, because then the budget gets the results will get stale. So you need to refresh content for each campaign. They need to have different bits of content, or different ads, should I say, linking to a single piece of content is really important, so that you get the frequency right.
Yeah. So how should businesses budget for their LinkedIn campaigns? You mentioned frequency. There is any optimal frequency?
Yeah. So sort of looking at 4 to 7 touches a month is kind of what we would recommend. So looking at how do I make sure that with each campaign we're looking at, we're getting in front of people the right number of times. And so if you've got a big audience and a small budget, there is a real risk that you completely waste your money, because if you only see my ad once in a month or longer,
you will forget about it. Yeah.
Zero, right? If I'm getting up to twice a week, so the higher end of that frequency, then you're much more likely to remember me. So you need to look and manage your budget so that you can get to your target audience, so you can get the frequency you need to make sure that your advertising works, because if you don't, it just won't work. And then people will go, well, I'm not getting your results. Well, it's super expensive. Well, it is because you're not getting the frequency needed for people to engage. So that's really important. And that's why you have to, coming back to the audience, or however you're doing it, you need to segment it down to match your budget so that you can get through the required frequency. And there are calculators you can use to do that. LinkedIn will help you with that. But if you Google the calculators, there are calculators there. But looking for that frequency, and bear in mind, coming back to the structure, we talked about brand and consideration, which you might be running at the same time. So you can look at the frequency across both. If you're serving the same content to the same audience, one is a brand campaign and one's a consideration campaign, now you might be dovetailing the timing of that. But if you are doing that, then of course you can look at the frequency across both. So you don't need to be at the top end of the frequency on both, because they're actually going to the same audience, and because they're different campaigns, LinkedIn will measure them differently. As long as the ads within each one are different, you're going to get the frequency within each. So it's looking at your whole campaign, the frequency across the two two campaigns you may be running, and if you're happy with that, and you think you've got the budget to get to the required frequency levels, then you'll get the engagement you need. And obviously you need to be doing that for a period of time to get that engagement. So LinkedIn is not an on-off platform, in my opinion. You've got to be on it.
Yeah.
Yes, you can run campaign related things and you can change things, but you need to be engaging with your audience on a constant basis. So yeah,
organically and paid, right?
Of course, ideally you want both. When you think about advertising on LinkedIn, it is about accessing incremental business, right? Because search is the cheapest way of finding people who already want your product or service, right? That is the beauty of search. But LinkedIn is about engaging with and creating incremental business, people that don't know about me and my products or service. Classic advertising. I'm looking for a new set of prospects, a new group of people to engage with. So you need to be in their environment often enough so that they're familiar with you. And then, you can kind of run specific campaigns that surge through that. And obviously alongside that, you're right, you've got to have your organic post, but people can only see organic if they're already connected to you, right?
Yeah.
So the whole point of advertising is to create that intent so that you get a relationship with them, and therefore you can engage them in a deeper way. And the other thing I would say is, one of the things about LinkedIn, which we measure for our customers, is we know that LinkedIn has an impact on search. So we can see an increase in search results as a consequence of advertising well on LinkedIn. Because, we'll all be in LinkedIn, we're doing something, and then we'll get distracted and come off it. But you've seen an ad that sparks your interest and you remember the company, maybe even clicked on the content, but you didn't follow the call to action. So, okay, I remember that. And then, you can try and go and find it and you can't necessarily see it. So then you'll Google that company or that service or that product, and that will drive the search results. So, advertising is about creating intent, finding new people. LinkedIn does that really well, but you need to manage the process to get the best return on investment.
Yeah, brilliant. We discussed before a little bit about retargeting for lead gen. So how can retargeting enhance the effectiveness of a LinkedIn marketing campaign for lead generation?
Yeah, so really important. Come back to said at the beginning, I don't think there's much point in asking somebody that doesn't know you to fill in an email address, a telephone number, and ask for a callback. The chances of that happening are very, very low. If you know that they've engaged with your brand campaign, your awareness campaign, if you like, and they've engaged with your consideration content, so you've delivered something of value, and then you go back to them, the chances of them engaging are much higher. So through any campaign that you're running on LinkedIn, you should be building that retargeting audience. And you can do that with just clicking a button and it builds that retargeted audience. And you can do that for both campaigns. So depending on budget and depending on the nature of the campaign, you could use awareness to drive consideration to drive lead gen. You can also, from the web, obviously from driving people to your website, you've also got that tracking capability. So I think it's really important.
Video viewers as well, if they have completed more than 50, 70%, 90% actually.
So that's just within the retargeting, that all takes place. And the importance of that is, rather than spending lead gen on 50,000 contacts on LinkedIn, I might be targeting 1,000 or 5,000. So therefore the cost of driving that lead gen activity is so much lower, and therefore your return on investment is going to be so much higher. And again, it comes back to how we open the call, which is, well, people just want lead gen. Well, yeah, but you're wasting your money if you're trying to get lead gen from a huge audience that doesn't know you. So although the temptation is there, use the retargeting. Therefore people have engaged with your content. And that way you've got a much better way of managing a budget and getting a return. So really important.
Brilliant. Well, we are coming to an end. Thank you so much, Adrian. It's been a very nice conversation, and I hope the people watching on YouTube, they have enjoyed as well. And please, if you have any questions, drop a message there, and we are very happy to answer them in the following webinar next week.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joaquin.
Thank you, Adrian.
Bye.
See you